pouquinho da Nica Sueño, trabalhando aqui.
I'm amazed how small you are.
Everything that comes into the factory comes on into this side. So the first room next to kind of our women's restroom is the where we bring like packaging materials like boxes and those things. All of our stuff, because we're so small and also for efficiency, all of our stuff comes in just in time. So as we go through the process, you'll see, but as soon as a cigar is ready to be packaged, the boxes are supposed to show up at the same time. And I can tell you in Nicaragua, that's probably one of my proudest accomplishments. Getting anything to happen on time is, or on a schedule is...
I can sell the call factory next.
Yeah.
Here's not Nica time.
Right. So our labels and cellophane and other packaging materials are in this room. And then a lot of our tobacco comes into here. So this is probably about 15 or 20% of the tobacco that we have in our inventory. Some components we have 3 or 4 months worth of tobacco. Other components we have 6 or 7 years worth of tobacco. It depends on the difficulty of sourcing and how long it takes us to acquire those. We get tobaccos in a bunch of different ways. One way, the easiest way, is we go over to Nica Prosa. They have tobacco that's already done, or we go to other places, AJ Fernandez, or to other pre-industry places. They have tobacco that's already done. We look at it, we say, yes, that meets our requirements, and we buy it, right? And in most cases, when we buy it, they store a lot of it for us and keep it fumigated and bug-free and in the right conditions. And then we bring it over here as we need it. We also have to travel a lot for tobacco, whether it's here or whether it's in Mexico or Brazil or the Dominican Republic. There's a lot of tobaccos that we look at when they're raw. We purchase them, bring them over here to Nica Prosa, and they do the fermentation process for us under our instruction. And then they store it. We bring a little bit over here as we need it. There's other tobaccos, for example, jalapa, where we actually work directly with specific farmers to co-op certain types of tobacco and bring those into Nica Prosa or into other places to ferment. So all the pre-industry, Esteban's been doing that for decades. We supervise and manage those processes, but we don't actually own those processes the way some really big factories do. The advantage of this for us is that we're able to go and purchase the exact type of tobaccos that we want. So for example, if we go to the Dominican Republic and we have a 60,000 pounds of U.S. Connecticut broadleaf wrapper, number 1A large, high priming, what you might call a Herald leaf or a number 1 or a number 2. That kind of tobacco, when it's uncured, we may pick out 6,000-7,000 pounds and say, this is the tobacco we like. But once it's through the entire process, there may only be 2,400, 3,600 pounds of that meets our requirements. So one of the advantages we have is we can only take that 3,600 and then they sell the rest of it to someone else. So in a sense, we're able to be very specific in what tobaccos we purchase. Obviously, we pay a higher price for that privilege, but it means that everything that we bring in here is exactly what we want, and we use it very efficiently. The alternative is the bigger you get. So imagine you're a small restaurant, and you only want the very, very, very best cuts of steak. And you have a local butcher, and you go to this butcher, and you go and get the very, very best cuts of steak. And then as your restaurant grows, you need more and more of those steaks. The problem is that butcher has other customers that want steaks. And if you're taking the very, very best of the steaks, the other customers will find another source for their broad needs, you know, of all types of meat, because they can't get the high type of meat that they want. So what'll happen is, as you get bigger, they say, hey, if you want the very, you know, specific type of cuts, then you also have to buy the other pieces, right? So if you want more steaks, you're gonna have to buy some of the lower quality steaks. You have to buy some of the ground beef, right? And then what happens is it becomes impossible to get enough of the kind of tobacco that you want. So you actually have to start growing your own tobacco or co-opting farms like your estate does. But what happens then is you get the whole cow, right? So now you get steaks, really good steaks, meat, you know, average steaks, hamburger meat, hot dogs, hooves, right? You get everything. Right. So this isn't a negative, because if everybody only bought tobacco the way we do, it would be 4 or 5 times more expensive, right? The whole tobacco industry is an ecosystem where it depends on people needing different parts of the tobacco plant, right? So here in Nicaragua, when you have a really big factory and your own grow operation, you have to, in your factory, you have to make really high quality products, you have to make great products, you have to make medium products, and you have to make cheap bundled cigars, short filler cigars, and then some factories like Victor Calvo even go as far as making like homogenized tobacco byproducts, like I believe they make like blunt wraps for, you know, whatever, which is like printing money. I mean, that's a great business to be in. So, but the point is that if he didn't consume that byproduct from us, it would just be waste. Nothing really goes to waste. Even in our factory, we produce a lot of byproduct tobacco, and that byproduct tobacco we sell in order to keep the ecosystem going. So here's an interesting thing about tobacco that a lot of people who've known about tobacco a long time don't know. Well, 2 things. I'll tell you 2 interesting things. One thing is, this is Ecuador, Connecticut. Ecuador, Connecticut is never fermented. So this is the color it comes out of the curing barn. So this is all sorted multiple times by size and quality, but we do a lot of sorting here to identify color, size. Some of this wrapper we buy, even though we buy it as wrapper, ends up being binder quality. So we have cigars that use the byproduct of that binder, or we have someone that we sell that to. Another interesting thing about tobacco is, if I ask you, so let me ask the blogger, hey guys, so if I ask you what is the difference between Seco, Viso, and Ligero, what is the difference? What is Seco, what is Viso, what is Ligero? Right,
Seco de abajo, viso de
so the
medio,
answer,
ligero.
almost always the universal answer is Seco is the lower part of the plant, Viso is the middle part of the plant, and Ligero is the top part of the plant. And that is absolutely wrong. Everything you've been told is a lie.
Okay.
Right? When it comes off of the plant, they don't call it Seco, Viso, Ligero. They call it first priming, second priming, third priming, fourth priming, fifth priming, etc. Right? It does not get classified as Seco, Viso, or Ligero until after it's been cured. So even at Nica Prosa, he probably didn't say we ferment all the Seco together. He probably said somewhere in the tour, we sort by texture, and then we ferment like textures together, right? Because it isn't until after the fermentation process, after the opportunity for so a Ligero, if it's fermented too quickly, may become a Viso, etc. But the texture of the leaf determines whether it's Secco, Viso, or Ligero. It's true that the lower primings have less texture, the later primings have higher texture, but you don't know when you have a leaf. It doesn't matter to me what priming it came from. All that matters to me is texture. So if you pick up a leaf and you feel this leaf here, in some factories, this may be considered a Viso. For us, this is probably considered either a low Viso or a Secco, because it has a little bit of texture and a little bit of thickness, so it has combustibility, but it doesn't have the flavor necessarily that we need from a Viso component. So when we purchase 100 pounds of Viso, what really happens for us is you may get 2% Ligero, very unlikely, because they sort that down. Because the higher it is, the more expensive it is. So you're not going to find accidentally high textured tobacco in a lower textured. But what we end up doing is we may open a pack of Viso and 60% of it is Viso and 40% of it meets our requirement for Secco. But further, if you say, for example, a paper thin piece of filler that's almost like rice paper is a 1, and really, really kind of shoe leather double Ligero is a 10. Some people will classify a 1 through a 4, or a 1 through a 2 Secco, a 3 through a 6 a Viso, or a 3 through a 4 a Viso, and a 5 through a 10 a Ligero, right? There are blends we have, like for example the one you're smoking, that uses a Dominican Ligero. But the Dominican Ligero we use is really like a 5 or a 6 Ligero. We buy it as Ligero, but it really functions like a Viso. And then there's tobaccos, there are other projects we use that, of that Dominican Ligero, we need the ones that are 6 or 7s, like in our Brazil Arapiraca, because it needs a little bit more of the flavor to offset the wrapper leaf. So even within certain types of tobacco, even if it's Dominican Olor Viso or Dominican Olor Ligero, we may have, even within this factory, 2 or 3 kind of grades of texture that are for different projects for that tobacco. So that concept of what you get is called yield. So if you get 1,000 pounds of tobacco, and that tobacco is X% Ligero or X% Viso or X% Secco, and how closely you can target those numbers is what's called yield. With wrapper, yield is how many pounds of fermented dry tobacco do you need to make 1,000 cigars, right? So this Ecuador, Connecticut is very thin, it's very clean. This Ecuador, Connecticut, we need to buy about 10 or 11 pounds for every 1,000 cigars that we want to make, right? Our Connecticut broadleaf, we may need to buy 18 or 20 pounds for every 1,000 wrappers that we want to get, right? And we measure how closely we are to those numbers. Because if we need 24 pounds of Connecticut to make 1,000 cigars, it costs us 20% more. If we can get really large Pennsylvania broadleaf, and we can make 2 cigars out of one side of a leaf, then we double our yield. So those little details like that are the pennies that add up in trying to maintain efficiency.
Do you lose, this is very fragile, do you lose a lot of Pennsylvania leaves? She looked, I mean, I'm watching her, there's not much.